Long before electric dehumidifiers, moisture meters, or industrial lumber yards, medieval builders faced the same enemy that destroys wood today: trapped water. Rot, warping, splitting, insect invasion, and sudden failure all begin with moisture that never truly leaves the timber. Medieval craftsmen knew this, and they solved it with a controlled wood kilning technique so reliable that cathedrals, bridges, ships and homes built with it still stand centuries later. This was not guesswork or superstition. It was a repeatable process refined through hard failure and hard winters. What makes it remarkable is not only that it worked, but that it worked consistently across regions, climates and generations. Why medieval builders could not afford wood failure. In the medieval world, wood was not cheap or disposable. A single oak beam could represent weeks of labour from felling to transport. If timber failed after construction, replacement was often impossible. Builders needed wood that behaved predictably under load, resisted rot, and did not twist as seasons changed. Air drying alone was too slow and unreliable in damp climates. So medieval builders developed low-temperature kilning systems that dried wood deeply without destroying its internal structure. So, you see, medieval kilns were quite different from the modern industrial kilns we know today. They weren't these sealed chambers, just blasting wood with heat. Instead, they were slow, breathable structures that relied on gentle warmth, careful control of airflow, and, well, plenty of time. The heat was indirect, never really intense, and that made all the difference. Temperatures in these old kilns stayed low enough to avoid what's called case hardening. That's when the outer part of the wood dries too quickly and traps moisture inside. But with medieval kilning, moisture could migrate outward naturally, you see. This approach prevented cracking and helped preserve the strength of the wood fibres. The main goal was always stability, not just speed. Now, as for how these kilns were put together, well, they used materials that were just, commonly available. A typical medieval kiln would be dug partly into the ground, or maybe built up against an earthen bank. Stone or clay walls served to retain heat, while also regulating humidity. And the firebox? That was usually quite small, sitting below or beside the wood stack, but never in direct contact with it. Flues guided warm air upward through stacked timbers before venting out through adjustable openings. This allowed craftsmen to control airflow precisely. Too much draft-dried wood unevenly. Too little caused mould. Balance was everything, really. How wood was prepared before entering the kiln. Wood was never kilned fresh from the tree. Medieval craftsmen allowed logs to season briefly in shaded airflow to release surface moisture. Bark was often partially removed to reduce insect activity while slowing moisture loss. Timbers were cut over size, anticipating slight shrinkage. Only then were they stacked in the kiln with spaces between each beam, ensuring warm air reached every surface evenly. Temperature discipline was really the key to success. Medieval kiln operators understood that heat could destroy wood just as easily as moisture could. So fires were kept small and steady, often fueled by charcoal or peat, for that consistent output. Temperatures were maintained just above ambient, sometimes honestly no warmer than a mild summer day. This slow heat, well, it encouraged internal moisture to move outward without actually stressing the grain. Kilning could take weeks, but the result in the end was timber that behaved as if it had aged naturally for years. Now, how did craftsmen know when the process was complete? Without instruments, medieval builders relied on repeatable indicators. Finished wood, for example, sounded sharper when struck. It felt lighter, but not brittle, and shavings curled cleanly instead of tearing. Rather clever, really. Most importantly, the wood stopped changing shape after removal from the kiln. Beams that passed this test were marked and reserved for structural use. Lesser timber was diverted to furniture or fencing. Why this method produced wood that resisted rot and insects? By removing moisture slowly and thoroughly, medieval kilning denied fungi and insects the environment they needed. The process also crystallized resins within the wood, especially in pine and fir, creating natural resistance. This is why medieval roof trusses and ship frames often survive even when exposed to damp conditions for centuries. So, how can this technique be applied today in practical settings, you might wonder? Well, modern survivalists and off-grid builders can actually apply the same principles using, pretty simple means. A shed with controlled vents, a small external stove, and a bit of patience can really replicate medieval kilning. Wood should be stacked with airflow gaps, heated gently over long periods, and importantly allowed to rest after drying. This method is especially valuable for cabin beams, tool handles, bows and furniture. Anywhere, really, where strength and stability matter a lot more than speed. So, why did the technique disappear? And why does it, deserve a revival? Well, industrial kilns, they really favoured speed over longevity. Fast drying met commercial demand, but it sacrificed durability, plain and simple. Medieval kilning fell away because it required attention, experience, and honestly, a fair bit of time. Yet, in an era so concerned with sustainability and resilience, this old method offers something modern systems often fail to deliver: wood that behaves predictably for decades. Now, understanding this technique isn't about romanticizing the past. It's about reclaiming knowledge that solved real problems with precision and restraint. Medieval builders trusted this process because, well, it worked every time, and the structures they left behind really do prove it. If this guide deepened your understanding of historical craftsmanship and practical survival knowledge, please support in the beginning by subscribing, sharing this episode, and helping keep serious history alive for future generations.